if we could do a roll call, that would be great.
All righty, good morning. I think everyone is aware of the moderating meeting instructions, so we'll go ahead and call Town of Marana.
Here, present.
Okay, thank you. Town of Sahuarita,
Present.
Town of Oro Valley. Okay, ADOT Tucson District,
Present.
Tohono O'odham,
Tricia Pablo here.
Pasquayaki, City of South Tucson, City of Tucson,
Present.
Pima County,
Here.
ADOT Transportation Planning Division,
Present.
Tucson Airport Authority. Okay, Suntran. Okay, University of Arizona,
Present.
Pima County DEQ, Tohono O'odham San Javier District. Okay, and I do believe Mr. Romero Truly is also here from FHWA.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll proceed with item number 2 on the agenda, in-kind reporting. Paul?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll go ahead and read our statement for the record here. You're all familiar with it, but regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. PAG collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for grants and federal dollars. If you're paid with federal dollars, please let us know. Time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAG staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and meeting materials. At the conclusion of this meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PAG RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Our next item is the approval of the meeting summary from our April 20th, 2022 meeting. Are there any changes to the meeting summary? If there are none, then is there a motion to approve the meeting summary?
I make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second to approve the meeting summary from April 20th of 2022. All in favor? Say aye.
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 Thank you. Anyone opposed? As I hear none, then the motion passes. Thank you. We're now up to item number 4, our legislative update on the proposed transportation-related legislation. David Zinda, please.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be able to speak with you all today. We are now about 130 days into the state legislative session, of course, a little bit more than what we would normally expect. As of earlier this week, unsurprisingly unchanged are the 1,780 bills that have been introduced. 250 of those have been passed, 229 have been signed, and not one vetoed quite yet. So what is the update? Well, really, I don't really know. There should be a lot of work going on the budget, and there currently has been really no action. Earlier, I think back in April, there was a skinny budget or continuing resolution that was introduced that would have maintained spending levels of the current fiscal year into the next fiscal year with a slight adjustment for inflation. But that one failed in committee. The real big hurdle with that was, whereas last year's budget stood at about $12 billion, this year we have an estimated $5 billion surplus. With an almost evenly split House and Senate, many members have varying opinions as to how that surplus should be used, whether it be on establishing a water authority, which you may have heard talks about, education initiatives, infrastructure projects, or turning it back to taxpayers in the form of tax cuts. Additionally, the Arizona Supreme Court recently ruled that budget reconciliation bills unrelated to the budget are unconstitutional. Formally, these bills help cement support for passage of an eventual budget. With a lack of action, likely driven by a lack of consensus on the budget, House and Senate leaders have largely been slow walking bills every day, just considering 2 or 3. Such a delay in the budget, if you recall, is not necessarily unprecedented, as we did not have a budget until the end of June last year, immediately preceding the beginning of the new fiscal year. So for our purposes, several transportation funding bills will likely see success or failure depending on if they reach that hurdle of being included in the budget. For many of these bills, the last stop before potential budget inclusion is normally going to be the Appropriations Committee. With that in mind, here are the couple we've been following throughout these last few months. Not too much has changed though, so I'll be brief. The first is House Bill 2396. This is a transportation appropriations bill that was largely influenced by the Rural Transportation Advisory Council and provides $50 million to various projects in the rural areas of Arizona. Closest to us would be around Rio Rico, the bridge on Ruby Road. Although it doesn't affect the PAG region per se, this is a good bill to follow to indicate what the legislature's priority. The head of the House Transportation Committee, I believe, has indicated a desire to only fund projects that are in the state highway program, state transportation improvement program, and nothing else, which would preclude a lot of the rural projects or smaller projects for many jurisdictions. So this bill has not passed House Transportation Committee, or I'm sorry, it did pass the House Transportation Committee in February, but it has not had any other action on that. House Bill 2598 and its twin bill in the Senate, 1356, is the transportation tax for Maricopa County. It's essentially their version of the RTA. Because there has been no movement on the budget, there really hasn't been much movement on this bill either. A lot of bills are stalled because of this ongoing budget debacle. House Bill 2728 is an appropriations bill that we're all very interested in for funding a Tier 2 study, in particular at the tune of $14 million for the Sonoran Corridor in Pima County, in addition to some money for other Tier 2 studies for I-11 in Maricopa County and $14 million for the North-South Corridor in Pinal County. This passed the House in late February and has landed and passed out of the Senate Appropriations Committee, which once again is probably its last stop until it might be included in the budget. Senate Bill 1148 relates to vehicle license tax sales price. You've heard me speak on this one before. It would change the VLT be calculated on the actual sales price of the car, thus diminishing statewide revenues about $70 million annually. And this would affect, in particular, Pima County. This did pass out of the Senate, has had no scheduled hearing in the House, however. Senate Bill 1239 is an appropriations bill that would widen I-10 between Casa Grande and Chandler. And of course, you know that this bill has passed and has been signed by the governor. This would appropriate $400 million from the general fund for next year as a part of a total estimated $1 billion in needs to build this project. Currently, the state is going after a mega grant, federal grant, to provide an additional $300 million to get to that $1 billion total funding need. Additionally, $290 million has already been earmarked for this project from state and federal dollars, including the half-cent sales tax in Maricopa County, which covers some ground. The project is expected to begin next year and to be completed by 2026. My last two bills concern the transaction privilege tax or prime contracting as well. House Bill 2701 is relating specifically to prime contracting. You've heard me talk about it before. It's just reducing the tax base for prime contracting classification of transaction privilege taxes to 60% from 65 for this next fiscal year, and then taking it down another notch to 55% from currently 65 for the following fiscal year. Beginning July 1st, 2024. This may affect RTA revenues by a few $100,000 per year as a result. This bill did pass out of the House It was referred to Senate committees, but has not had any scheduled hearings yet. Lastly, Senate Bill 1004 also affects TPT in terms of remote sellers. And the big picture, this bill does several things, but it's going to apply TPT to taxable sales instead of gross sales, which may have some fiscal impact on the general fund and would likely lower TPT revenue since taxable sales tend to be less than gross sales. This was approved out of the Senate Committee of the Whole, but has really had no further action since then. And that concludes my report, Madam Chair, unless there are any other questions.
Thank you, David. Are there any questions for David? Okay, I don't see any hands up, but please, committee members, feel free to speak up if you do have a question, okay? Thank you. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we have the Regional Mobility and Accessibility Plan update from Jeanette.
Good morning, Madam Chairman. We
Good
are so
morning.
happy to have you for one more meeting.
Thank you. So nice to see you, Jeanette.
You too. And thanks for being here, everybody. I'm here to just give you a brief update on the Regional Mobility and Accessibility Plan. That's our long-range plan. My name is Jeanette Turen, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm the project manager for this project. It's been a while since I've spoken to this committee, but last month, Dave Zinda, Josh Pope, and Paul Casertano did give an update on the project. And we anticipate being in front of this group periodically. I won't even say periodically, I'll say frequently over the course of the next year or two to bring updates and get feedback from you guys. So you'll see me more frequently. As most of you know, this is a team effort. So there's a lot of pieces to the RMAP. Some might take longer than others. So if you have any questions about what we're doing or where we're at with things, feel free to reach out to me at any time. Right now, we are focusing on the existing conditions and the data that will feed into the long-range plan. We're sort of just setting that foundation for the development of the plan and bringing together the data and information that will be used. So you've seen some of those items come through last month with Dave Zinda's update, where they talked about the different elements of the finance plan. And then, we're going to continue working on the modeling and those pieces where we're getting that data and that information ready so that we can update our performance measures, our project list, and all the elements that'll feed into the development of the plan. So that finance plan, like I just mentioned, is underway. They've begun working through the different elements as they updated you guys last month. That is a big piece of the long-range plan. So you will be seeing updates from time to time on that. But just to remind everybody that the fiscal constraint of the plan is that federal requirement that we're really focusing on. So we have to make sure our project list is fiscally constrained. And so to do that, we have to get that that bottom line dollar amount as accurate as possible. So as we work through that and get our methodology developed, you'll hear updates, and we'll be reaching out to jurisdictions directly, but also to this committee. So keep an eye out for those updates as well. Josh presented last month on the project portal, and if I remember the conversation correctly, this committee did ask for reminders to go in and continue working on the portal. We have noticed that some of you have gone in there and have begun cleaning up your projects and doing updates. We've received emails from some of you with questions and requesting some changes to the functionality. I know Josh has been responsive to those requests, and we will continue to do that. The project portal is a layered project. It's a layered approach. So right now we're asking for some cleanup work in there. Then the next step will be to add new projects. Then of course, we're gonna be looking at refining that project list once everybody's come in and added their information. And then of course, the final step will be looking at all the data and trying to make sure that list is fiscally constrained. So that's sort of the progress that you'll see on just that side of the plan. Another big piece, of course, is our public outreach. We're working on our public outreach tool that we will be using to gauge the regional priorities. And as the COG MPO, we're always going to say that regional priority. So we do know that a lot of the different jurisdictions have done direct public outreach for their communities priorities and have gone through planning exercises, but ours is really going to focus on that collective priority, that what does the whole region want to see. And in doing that, we're going to be looking for those regional threads that tie the plan together. So most of and if you're unfamiliar with the long range plan, you're new to the process, please do reach out. We can talk through some of this, but we are the regional umbrella. We're the big plan for the county, for all of our member jurisdictions. So we kind of have to make sure we keep it at that level and are inclusive of all the needs and wants of the region. So our public outreach is really going to be focused on that. We're also going to do our best to be really mindful of the public message. There's a lot of transportation planning going on. Dave Zinda just walked you through some of the bills and the funding and all kinds of great activity going on. Efforts have just happened and wrapped up with some jurisdictions. Others are going through their own process. So we want to gauge the public and interact with them, but in a very kind of easy to understand way where we're not muddying the waters. So that's really something that we're going to focus on, and it's going to be a challenge, and we recognize that. And of course, as always, we're just going to ask you guys for cooperation, because getting that public feedback is going to be an important piece of the RMAP. That's really all I have for you today. Like I said, we're going to be coming in front of this committee frequently throughout the next year or two. It is a 4-year process. So just keep that in mind, that we're moving on different elements. At this point, like I said, it is data collection, doing the existing conditions, and building that foundation for future decision making. So, Madam Chair, that's all I have today. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Jeanette. So I'm sorry, did I hear you correct? This is a 4-year process that we're going to do?
Yes. Well, the federal requirement is that we update every 4 years. And so we did approve the last plan back in September of 2020. The air quality conformity was determined early in 2021. So, we're working in that 4-year time frame. So we're actually already in the middle of it. We've actually begun doing that. And what that means from the internal side is we're working on our modeling, we're working on our data collection, and all those pieces that'll go into the ending part of the plan. So it's already begun. I mean, we keep building our data collection and our modeling bigger and better. It's a nonstop project. So we're just back with you guys now.
Great. Thank you very much, Jeanette. Are there any questions for Jeanette?
Catherine, it looks like you have a question.
I do. Just a quick question. I think I heard you mention that David Zinda sent out a financial update or requested information. I'm not sure who it went to, but I know I didn't receive one. So
no, that's coming. So they mentioned that at the last meeting, and that will be coming. There was a little bit of a slowdown. I had some other things to attend to, so they'll be coming to you, pretty soon. I optimistically say in the next week or two, but I don't want to speak for their workload, but we'll be getting you guys soon.
I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. Obviously, with Anna departing, make sure that I'm included in those distribution lists.
Yes, we know where to find you, Catherine. Don't worry.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I don't see any other questions online, Janet, so thank you. Next on the agenda, we have an update on the Arizona Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Deployment Plan. Dustin Fitzpatrick. Dustin?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, TPC members. My name is Dustin Fitzpatrick, PAG's Air Quality Planning Coordinator, and I'll be providing a brief update on the Arizona Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Deployment Plan. Next slide. Okay, so the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, or NEVI formula program, was authorized by the bipartisan infrastructure law. And Arizona's apportionment will be approximately 76 million over the next 5 years to deploy EV charging stations along the national highway system routes within our state. So EV charging stations will be required every 50 miles at minimum within a mile from the exits, and must have a minimum of 450 kilowatt DC fast chargers with CCS type plugs. This is a new criteria that has changed from 2020 when PAG completed the I-10 Alternative Fuels Corridor Infrastructure Deployment Plan for EV charging in coordination with ADOT, when at the time only one CCS charger was required to be within 5 miles of an exit. So with PAG's input, ADOT submitted a nomination last Friday to the Federal Highway Administration to designate Interstate 19 with status as a corridor pending for EV charging, which would enable it to be eligible for NEVI program funding. Next slide. This is a map from Federal Highways of the EV charging interstate corridors in Arizona that have been nominated in rounds 1 through 5. So pending approval, down south I-19 will be added so that Arizona interstates will all be eligible for funding. Next slide. This map shows the DC fast charging station locations in our region, indicated by the green dots, that currently meet the NEVI program criteria of being located within a mile of Interstate 10 with at least 450 kilowatt CCS chargers. The stations in Casa Grande and Benson are located more than 50 miles from the location at Tucson Premium Outlets Mall there, which will require one new EV charging station in each of these gaps, with potential locations in Marana, Tucson, South Tucson, and unincorporated Pima County. Along I-19 to the south, 2 new station locations will be required, likely in Nogales and then also in the Sahuarita Green Valley or Tohono O'odham Nation Santa Beer district area. Next slide. ADOT's required to complete the state EV charging plan by August 1st this year, and we'll be opening up a stakeholder process for input into the plan development. If you'd like to be included, please contact William Randolph or Myrna Bondock at ADOT. Their email addresses are provided there. So from an air quality standpoint, this plan will benefit our region by speeding up the adoption of zero tailpipe emission vehicles to reduce transportation-related pollutants such as ground level ozone. Thank you. I'll be glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Dustin, for that update. Are there any questions from the committee? I don't see any hands up, Dustin, so thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, moving right along. Next on the agenda, we have the region-wide traffic performance evaluation and measurement. Hansu, no?
Yes.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Madam Chair, and good morning, just TPC committee members. And not sure, just oh yeah, I can just control my slide. Let me just check if I can move. Yeah, okay, good. Thank you. And above all, thank you so much for this opportunity to update PAC's recent accomplishment and the new project with the University of Arizona. My name is Hyun-Soo No, modeling manager at PAC, and here's the agenda. And first, we're going to talk about the PAC's initiatives, so why we are doing this project, and also just mainly for project number 1. And we'll talk about regional traffic data inventory and the major data sources and the region-wide application and ongoing work. Then we'll just we'll talk shortly about the new project number 2 and with the university team. So PAC's initiatives, and as you know, the PAC and RTA is responsible to improve our regional transportation system. also following in the federal guidelines and requirements. And then one of the example we can think of is a traffic count program, which is for supporting National Highway Performance Monitoring System called HPMS, as well as just the package also interested in, and the new and TISMO and transportation systems management and operation and ITS for better planning and for better planning initiatives as fulfilling the role as an MPO. And on the other hand, to maintain those current traffic operation system to mitigate the traffic congestion, our jurisdictional partners and uses the numerous traffic count system and or just the monitoring system, including video cameras and loop detectors and the plus and recently and the crowdsourced data, which are now quite just popular and easily accessible and also convenient to monitor the current traffic condition. So as you're expecting just the mutual benefit to our jurisdictional partners in the PEC and RTA, we initiated this project with a university team led by Dr. Wu a couple of years ago to answer these questions. What kind of regional traffic data is available? How are these data interrelated? Where are those sources? Where are the sources of data? How to integrate the data? How to maintain the quality of data? One of our expectation is to just improve our just the region-wide traffic volume data through this project. And here you see that just the regional and the traffic sensor data inventory. And as you see, you see much different, just the numerous in the traffic sensors operated by in the each jurisdictional partners, which is in total around 600 in region total. So you can find just the 2020, and I'm sorry, I'm just testing. So there's just the link, you can follow that and the actual just the inventory archived in just back to 2020. Moving. Okay, sorry. It's a bit slow here. And for regional major data sources and for this traffic volume estimation, we identified the two major data sources. One is the event-based data from MaxView system and video-based data through My Vision. And for the event-based data through MaxView system, among 354 controllers and excluding My Vision, Hawk, and the communication disabled intersections, roughly 200 plus intersections with a good quality of data was assessed and applied to the region. And My Vision volume data and 122 intersections available. So Pima County 109 and the town of Marana 13. So here, thank you to City of Tucson for us to access the My MaxView system and data, as well as the PCDOT and town of Marana for just the My Vision data access through just the API. And here's the flow chart and of the data processing. Original flow chart, including just the machine learning algorithm developed by university team, is much more complicated. But I'd like to just show a little bit just a high level overview and the whole procedure. The first, starting with the two different data sources, MaxView and the My Vision database. So simply, and estimating just the 15-minute turning movement count. And so for MaxView system, and we use the machine learning algorithm, which is called multi-layer perception neural network. And for My Vision database, we use the My Vision API and the massaging the data and changing to the format and aggregating 15-minute My Vision turning movement counts. So using this and the two data sources and MaxView and the My Vision turning movement counts. So using those upstream and downstream and the consecutive and the turning movement counts, and we estimated just the segment counts. And here's the one of the major outputs and turning movement count estimation. Total 369 turning movement count locations included in the max view, 263 intersections, and the my vision 106 intersections. So on the bottom, you see, and this is the output format in the example for each intersection, also time stamp and the aggregate every 15 minutes for each turn movement and the turn movement volumes estimated and the intersection ID. And on the right-hand side, and you see that just a snapshot, this is the one of the example, estimated total average turning movement count volume per intersection during peak hours of September 2020. And using just, as mentioned earlier, just using consecutive in the upstream, downstream turning movement count, we also applied just to develop the methodology and the first segment volume estimation, 358 segment locations evaluated. And this, in on the bottom, you see the table using just the upstream volume, downstream volume, and the weighting based on the distance that we estimated just the traffic volume on each specific segment. On the right-hand side, you see that estimated total average segment volume during peak hours of September 2020. For the ongoing work, and you can find the final report in the APAC website. And we internal process and conducted and just finally just uploaded as a partial output 2021 My Vision TMC data is available at PAC MS2 website on the bottom. And also PAC is now just improving and some just the internal procedures and so hoping to just better in the quality control the data outputs and either the My Vision and the MaxView system. So here's some just a hint about the project number 2 and based on the project number 1. The first just title is a region-wide traffic performance evaluation, performance measure development using multi-source data. And based on the project number 1, we tried to just investigate the sources of traffic data, regional TISMO related traffic data collection, maintenance, and the advanced modeling. So hoping to develop the cost-effective TISMO related performance measures. So here's all I prepared. And if you have any, if you have any question, I'm happy to answer that.
Thank you, Hansu, for that information. I see a question from Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not really a question, but just kind of a recognition of the great work that Hinsu has been able to do in this area in partnership with the U of A. For years, we've known that there's a lot of valuable data in the equipment that's been deployed throughout the region, the detection systems, as well as the interconnected traffic signal network. But there's been some difficulty in really turning attention to digging into what's there and how best to use it. And Hinsu has really allowed us to get really a lot further in understanding what value that data has to both us from the modeling and planning perspective, as well as all of you from the operating and TISMO perspective as well. So these are great steps forward that are going to help our data acquisition processes from volumes and turning movement count perspective and all the pieces that we need to feed our modeling efforts. But hopefully there's going to be great benefit to all of you and your operators as well. We've been working closely with them to get into this, and we look forward to great steps in Project 2 as well.
Thank you, Paul. I agree 100%. Seeing all the data points and everything that's gathered, it's wonderful information for all of us. So we really do appreciate it. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you very much, Hansu. We'll see you later. Okay, the next item we have is Regional Transportation Revenue Update from Jamie Brown. Jamie?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you on this item. The TPC meeting packet memo for this item includes an update to the table we shared with you back in April with updated revenue numbers for HERF 12.6, 2.6, and RTA, as well as federal obligation authority amounts. The meeting packet also includes an updated HERF revenues report. Some key points to consider are that all revenue projections will be reviewed and updated during the next TIP development cycle this summer. Actual revenues are performing better than anticipated. Additionally, the amount of federal obligation authority has increased to reflect amounts authorized under the bipartisan infrastructure law. Revenue projections for the fiscal year 2024 through 2028 TIP development cycle, which will be developed this summer, will reflect this increased amount. Upcoming PAG Regional Council and RTA Board discussions, as well as anticipated policy decisions that will follow, will guide how and when regional funds can be programmed during the next TIP cycle. We'll be talking more about the TIP development process during the next agenda item as well. Additionally, as part of this agenda item, we wanted to provide an update on formal TIP amendment 2022.020, an earlier version of which was approved by TPC in March. As you may recall, with the passing of the bipartisan infrastructure law, additional state STBG, known as ASTBG or ASTP, apportionments were allocated to ADOT for the PAG planning area and must be programmed in the current fiscal year 2022 through 2026 PAG TIP. This is so the funding can then be incorporated into ADOT's tentative FY 2023 through 2027 Transportation Facilities Construction Program prior to the June 17th Arizona State Transportation Board meeting. At the request of ADOT and as presented by Mark Hoffman at the March TPC meeting, the TPC approved the original TIP amendment. Since the TPC review and approval, the federal aid ledger has been rebalanced, and as a result, the ADOT South Central District identified additional ASTBG funding that needed to be programmed. On May 3rd, ADOT made the request to program those funds on the I-10 Country Club TI project. Last week, the PAG Management Committee approved the updated TIP amendment as part of the expedited amendment approval process. So thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Members of staff and I are available to take questions. And with regard to the TIP amendment, Mark Hoffman has agreed to help answer any questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Are there any questions from the committee? Ms. Kaplan.
I just have a quick question for clarification on the tables that are provided in the packet. The last set of tables is the projected revenues adopted May 2021. But for the federal obligation authority, is that inclusive of like the CRISA funding and other funding that maybe came out after the fact? Because I don't recall that number from the constraint when we did the TIP.
Right, yes, and that number is higher that you see. So in the packet, you see 26.5 million for projected federal obligation authority. That was higher than what was in the subsequent years because we had to make an adjustment based on additional ADOT revenue that was made available during the TIP development cycle. That number does not include other sources like CRISA. So it hasn't been, we haven't adjusted that number since that was adopted in May 2021. So, and that was the amount that was used for fiscal constraint. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, then hearing none, Jamie, if we can segue into the schedule for milestones for fiscal year TIP 24 to 28. And then we'll leave it open for questions for any item 8 and 9 for everybody. Okay.
Perfect. Yes. Yeah. Thanks again, Madam Chair, members of the committee. On April 19th, a tentative schedule of key milestones for the fiscal year 2024 through 2028 Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, was shared with the TPC members. And for anyone unfamiliar with our TIP process, it's worth providing some key points, and we'll restate these during the TIP development process as well. So PAG is the federally required and state designated metropolitan planning organization for the region, is responsible for preparing the TIP. The TIP is a 5-year schedule and budget of proposed transportation improvements within Pima County, and it's updated biannually through a multi-step process in association with our PAG member jurisdictions and other implementing agencies. The process takes approximately 10 months from kickoff in August to regional council approval in May. And the tentative schedule in the TPC packet is similar to previous years. The general phases include scoping and kickoff, draft project list development, technical analysis, draft tip document assembly and review, public involvement, which includes open houses, the 30-day comment period and public hearing, and then final tip approval. So with that, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. We're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jamie. I have a quick question, or maybe just a comment. So as we're also going to be working through the RMAP, and there'll be some public meetings and information, there'll be some tie-in to this tip and then the future RMAP and how those projects are either included in the tip or not included in the tip. Will that be part of the public outreach?
Well, that's a great question, Madam Chair, members of the committee. And in fact, it's a subject of internal discussion here at PEG because we also have the RTA Next process as well. So we're mindful of the overlap of these processes and want to make sure that as we're speaking with the public and our committees that we provide as much clarity as possible about how those processes are different and how projects may or may not be included in any of those documents, including the tip. With that, I do want to open it up to members of the RMAP team to see if anyone wants to add any additional information or any other staff members. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm happy to add a little bit to that answer. So, right, you make a very good point. The RMAP and the TIP and RTA, they're all kind of tied together under the umbrella of the RMAP. So for a project to receive funding and to be programmed in the TIP, it has to be in the RMAP. So we're always working with Jamie's group to make sure that that is met. So if a project pops up on the request on the TIP, we make sure it's in the RMAP. So yeah, when we go out for public outreach on the TIP, the RMAP, RTA Next, we're doing all this sort of at the same time. And we're trying to navigate how to be really mindful of making sure that we get the public outreach that we need that's required for each of these different processes, that it's informative so that folks know what's going on and what the different roles of these different projects are. So yeah, we're starting to navigate that. And I don't know if it's fortunately or unfortunately, they're all happening at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah. So and that's, one of the things, at least I can speak for the RMAP, is that, that's why we're going to be working really closely with this committee and the jurisdiction specifically to make sure that the public information that we're getting and the feedback that we're getting is also sort of aligning with what you're getting from your individual jurisdiction so that it's all represented, and that if there is any conflicts or confusion, we can sort of navigate that through our individual processes. So the tip is obviously completely different because we're actually assigning dollars to projects. Yes. And so it's very immediate, and we need to make sure that everybody understands, like, now we're tying dollars to a project, we're going to move forward and spend the money. So that level of public outreach is a lot different than what we're doing at the 30-year planning horizon stage in the RMAP. But nonetheless, it's all important to make sure, one, that we're communicating with the public and they understand what's going on, and two, that we're getting valuable feedback. So, as with the county and all the other jurisdictions here at the table, you guys are constantly gauging public comments and outreach on your individual projects, whether it be a transportation plan, an individual project, maybe even a comprehensive plan or a general plan. And all that feedback, is very valuable to all of our processes. I like to say it, especially to the RMAP, because we are looking at this sort of high level, long-term outlook. So we do try to look at that stuff and keep in touch with you guys so that we hit that mark as best as we can.
Thank you, Jeanette. That's helpful. And you're right. It's the confusion that might come. Our tip is the fiscally constrained one, that where the projects are happening. RMAP is the overarching. The public could get a little confused about which projects are really funded or not, right? So we we do need that outreach, but we also want them to understand what they're actually commenting on, so that they don't get put in the wrong place, or comments are, just make sure that they understand that they're heard correctly.
Absolutely. And then RTA Next is one flavor of money, right? So that's
Yes.
one funding stream. So there's definitely going to be different thoughts and opinions on all of those. I think, the takeaway is that we're in a very fortunate place right now with a lot of money coming from the federal government, with our jurisdiction securing funds, with projects being delivered. So when there's a lot of movement and there's a lot of activity, that means there's planning and project delivery going on, which is best for the community. So, it's a blessing and a curse.
Yes, it is. I agree. So that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Robin, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I wanted to go back to the immediacy question and talk about this RTA plan and talking about the TIP creation. And we've been seeing such an enormous rise in construction prices. So I wondered if during the process of creating the next 5-year TIP, if we're going to look at increasing the amounts in the construction projects in order to account for that. In other words, making those amounts in the TIP larger than the ballot amounts just to account for that inflation that we're seeing right now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Rain, in terms of inflation adjustments to RTA projects, that's probably a conversation that the TMC and RTA board would have and provide direction to PAG staff and on how we would address that. Although it's a really important point. So it's something we need to make sure that we're mindful of, understanding that costs are increasing and how do we reflect that in the TIP appropriately. So at this point, I can't really comment on what that's going to look like in the TIP, and we await policy direction from the RTA board. But with that, I also open up to other PAG RTA staff for additional comments. Thank you.
I mean, just to clarify, the reason I'm asking a question is it's very important that we deliver this RTA plan. And to me, to assess that inflation against these projects so that we can actually deliver them is of utmost importance.
Yes, that's point taken. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robin, for that question. Catherine?
Thank you. Kind of to piggyback on some of Robin's questions, but also some general questions. I know the last TIP cycle was a bit long and prolonged, and we should probably reflect on some of our lessons learned to try to make it a little bit more streamlined this time around. So I know that we had made the suggestions last go round that an all-day TIP meeting like we used to have, where we can really get into some of these details of fiscal constraint and cost escalation, whether it's inflation or, shifting of project schedules, all those things that need to balance out across the 5 years that, previously had been a great conversation and an all-day TIP discussion. So if there's any consideration of that, that would be great. And then secondly, I see, again, we had challenges last time when we got kind of piecemeal lists of projects rather than the whole composite list at once so that we could evaluate it as one big picture. So I don't know if any thought has been given to that. I fully acknowledge that the ADOT list comes later and there's going to be tweaks along the way, but seeing it as one big picture is really helpful when doing our evaluations and we notice projects that maybe are missing or need to be added. I know HSIP projects were missing last time because that wasn't really a list called out, so we didn't have a review opportunity. So some consideration of how that can be worked into the schedule you've presented would be helpful. And then my last question, which will come into play with this is, I know it's a TMC conversation, an RTA board conversation, but with some of these requests to move projects potentially out of the current RTA and into RTA Next, that's going to free up some money. So I don't know timeline wise where that fits in with this and if we'll be able to make sure we have fiscal constraint and not just be scrambling last minute to move things around. So those are my comments more than questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Ms. Skinner. if I may, I would like to comment on your questions, and maybe that would be helpful. So much appreciate the feedback that you've provided during the last tip cycle, as well as on this tentative schedule of key milestones. It was a longer process than normal. There were some things that I think were unusual as well. The pandemic did change the timing for the ADOT project list, which normally the State Transportation Board approves the 5-year construction program in June. It wasn't actually approved until late October. So that did affect the timing, unfortunately, with that particular list. But we're certainly mindful of the fact that it's more helpful for you to see all the lists together if possible. So we're going to do what we can to get those to you when they're available, and also be able to provide a full list like we did, so that you could see if there was something missing like the HTIP. So thank you for that feedback and that review. With regard to the all-day TIP meeting, last TIP cycle, we actually had 2 TIP subcommittee meetings in October, and they were pretty lengthy. There was one in early October, one in late October, and I think they were both over 2 hours. So although they wasn't like one full day, I think we actually had almost a full day of discussion on the main draft project list. So what we're doing, some details of this TIP development cycle are still to be determined. But if the last cycle is if it's going to be similar to last cycle in terms of what's available for programming, if it's really limited to the fund sources that are not committed to the RTA, such as some of the transit funding, that sort of thing, we probably won't have a project scoring process like we did many years ago. And so last TIP cycle, we didn't have a full TIP subcommittee meeting to go through that scoring process, because really the focus has been on just making sure that we complete those RTA commitments. So I guess we can talk more about that, Ms. Skinner, in terms of that full day TIP meeting and what your expectations are. We can do that offline, but we'll certainly take that under consideration and see how we can put that into the process as it makes sense for this next TIP cycle. And then the final piece, and this is probably something for other staff to weigh in as well, but yeah, we are certainly mindful of the fact that the RTA board and the technical management committee are undergoing some review of projects and making some important decisions about the scope of projects, as well as projects that would be perhaps shifted into RTA next, that will have an impact on our TIP development cycle potentially. So in terms of the timeline for that, that's we know that process is underway, but we don't have any fixed deadlines for that. So we may have to make some adjustments during our TIP cycle as needed, but we're certainly mindful of that process. And with that, I'll open it up to other staff members to comment or any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
So those are all good points, and maybe please don't be scared off by the all-day TIP meeting. Maybe it doesn't have to be an all-day, but the more comprehensive information I think that can be shared and presented with the TPC members, the better decisions we can all make. And I think that's really what the committee members are more after than necessarily an all-day meeting. We want just a more comprehensive meeting of where the TIP stands and with all the projects as much as possible, as many possible projects and as many funding sources and realities that can be shared. That makes for a more holistic and easier way to process the entire TIP for us. So I think that's really what we're after.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Robin?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And just to piggyback on that comment, I would say that was one of the comments sort of made in the TMC last time, was discussing all of these projects in a group public setting so that everyone understands how and why we are prioritizing projects.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Robin. Okay, are there any additional comments on the revenue update and the TIP development? for Mr. Brown? Okay. I see no other hands. So we'll go to item number 10, which is the future agenda items. I will take this opportunity to say one of the agenda items you will need is to elect a new chair and vice chair, as this will be my last meeting with the committee. And I want to thank PAG and TPC for everything that they've done for Pima County. And in my prior life, when I was at ADOT, PAG has been part of my entire career here in Tucson. So I'm really appreciative of all the support, all the great staff, Sonia and everybody, and you're all very helpful. And I do appreciate all the organizations put the meetings together. And I wish you all a lot of luck with the next TIP process. So thank you. Any agenda items for next meeting?
Just a big thank you to you, Madam Vice Chair. Your steady hand and presence throughout the years has been a tremendous help to the region and helping guide TPC deliberations and TIP processes and long-range plan development and all the other fun stuff that we get to do. So you will be sorely missed, but we know Pima County will be in good hands and the region has a bright future ahead. So thanks so much for your service, and we'll miss you.
Thank you, Paul, very much. And yes, the county is in good hands. You won't even know I'm gone. You won't even know I'm gone. So thank you, everybody. I don't hear any suggested agenda items for next meeting. So last on our agenda is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Anybody opposed? All right, sounds like crickets. So thank you very much. The meeting stands adjourned. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Anna.